Raiders is about to come out, and main weapon power has been a talk of discussion. So I've gotten quite a few questions asking me, okay, what would I actually change? So we'll do a little patch hopes video with the overall theme being buffing more skill-dependent midline fighting type weapons. Let's talk about the two problem ones and the nerfs I do first. Outside of these, the only other nerf I'm really hoping for is that Tri-Strike gets some kind of nerf to reduce its zone cheese. I think its radius going from 7 to 6.5 would be the start. As for these two, I've gone on record multiple times saying I don't think nerfing these down would fix the game or anything. That said, I am, like everyone else, kind of tired of them. The effects on the game are clearly not positive, so like, if this has to be nerfed to help make things feel at least a little bit better, even if it won't solve the core problem, sure. I'll keep these fast. I think that 52 should have 52 shots. Its ink efficiency should be more of a problem, so it can't spam wall as much and has to commit more to a fight or have more downtime for other people to exploit against the weapon. If they want to do something else, I think making it strafe slightly slower would be a good weakness for this weapon, since, you know, it is kind of a slower gal-type weapon, and that would make sense. I'd like to see Blaster's indirect radius toned back to 3.3 instead of 3.385, whatever it's at right now. I think that would be a good change for the weapon, for the obvious reason that double indirect is still quite easy. I don't really have a problem with 52 and Blaster being easier entry weapons for their class. I just don't want them to take over. I think the emphasis needs to be more on buffs than nerfs, but yeah. Oh, and if people are worried about VAC 96 still, then yeah, I still think 200 on this is fine. Alright, let's talk about buffs. Real quick, if Tri-Strike ever does get nerfed, this thing should immediately be brought back down to 210. Just get it out of the way. Next candidate, Range Blaster. We're going to be going through a few weapons that used to be meta and have been nerfed in ways I would like to see them buff back a little bit. This is probably the most obvious one. I'd like to see the jump RNG reduced from 8 degrees to 5 degrees. I think that not having to run as much IA would be great for running a little bit more swim speed for keeping up with things, and I also think if the blast radius is going to be small, it should at least be a lot more accurate. It's not the same as what S-Blast is. It's obviously making them a little bit more similar, but I think it'd be fine. In addition to that, I think it should have 10 shots instead of 9. 2 shots after a bomb is just kind of pathetic. I think I have a bit of main saver, so my bad. Take that off. 2 shots after a bomb is just kind of pathetic, and I don't really see the need for that in today's environment. I think it could have a 3rd shot. Outside of that is S-Blast. I don't think S-Blast needs a whole ton of particular buffs or anything, but if I had to give it one small tweak to make it just a little bit more appealing, I'd probably say it should be 200p. 210 isn't really super necessary. The short-range blast radius was the problem. It's adjusted, so give it, like, a tiny bit of something. That's probably fine. Splatoon Stamper. Personally, I'd like to see the ink efficiency on this changed. This weapon gets practically no burst combos because of just how insanely ink-hungry the weapon is. It's very hard to use it often. And ink efficiency also affects its zip casters, because obviously when you're in your zip cast, your main weapon ink efficiency can determine the duration. So it's a huge buff for this weapon to be able to have a little bit of its ink efficiency back. So I'd say give it like 10% back. And then zip is not a great special. It should not be 210. Make it like 190 or at least 200 if that's more reasonable. I think those changes alone would put Stamper in a spot where it actually get like picked and be worth it. Speaking of weapons that it would be cool if they're worth it to get picked is Squeezer. I think that Squeezer should get a few buffs back. Absolutely not the range, it was annoying, but I think a few small changes would be good. I think the strafe speed can be increased by a little bit, not the 8% it was nerfed by, but maybe give it like half of it back. That way it still carries a little bit more mobility. I don't think the shot velocity needed to be reduced by 5%, so like you could change that, and that would probably be fine. And most importantly to me, with how inconsistent Zuka is and how bad this weapon paints, this thing should be like 200p. I do not think it needs to be 220. Getting more Zukas would do a lot for this weapon's balance spot. Next up, Dooley. Dooley hasn't gotten nerfed too much directly, more indirectly, but we've also toned back Crab quite a lot, which puts more emphasis on the main weapon. I would like to see the strafe speed slightly increased. The strafe speed on Dooley isn't bad, but I think Dooley being able to stay and poke in this mode longer without committing to dodge rolls would be a cool change for it. So making it just a little bit faster would be good for me, I think. I'm also not opposed to making this 190 a bit, because I always felt 200p on it was kind of unnecessary. I don't think this weapon needs that many changes, though, but those would probably help. Dooley Squatchers, I think, should be a little bit cheaper on its dodge rolls, probably from 9 to 8%, and a shot spread reduction in both modes would be good. I think that it's a little bit absurd how bad this weapon's RNG is, even when it's grounded. I don't think it's really necessary. The weapon already has bad damage and a bad damage number and 4 shots to kill, so like, can we at least allow the weapon to hit its bullets when it's shooting at the opponent? I also think this weapon would benefit from having like 10 points for special, cheaper specials, just so it has a little bit more team utility. Apologize for the lightning storm outside if you guys can hear that, by the way. I have no idea if that's in the microphone or not, but it's quite loud on my end. H3. I'd like to see H3 be about 5% more ink efficient, paint 5% more, and probably have like 3% more range. I'm also not opposed to just reducing the end lag a little bit as well, but I think given L3 was given a bit more range, and this weapon's felt a little bit outdated without damage up, it makes sense to give this weapon more range. I don't want too many weapons to get more range, that has been a common theme lately, but I think for, you know, weapons that were kind of dependent on damage up for a while, this kind of makes sense. And H3 has had a long time of irrelevancy, so I think we're safe here. Squiffer's another weapon that benefited a lot from MPU, so I think changes to it could be interesting. One thing I'd really like to see is its strafe speed. Like, is it hailing now? Holy shit. Alright, well, I guess you guys are going to be able to hear the weather. Oh, well, I don't want to stop this discussion partway through because of this. This is the time I have. Anyway, I think that Squiffer should basically strafe faster, both when charging the weapon and, more importantly, when it's fully charged. I think that would make it a lot easier to close the gap on opponents and just kind of be able to utilize the weapon's mobility a little bit more. I also debated just giving this thing more range like it used to have, but I found that kind of annoying before. So I think added mobility that isn't dependent on you jumping with the weapon would do a lot for making this thing feel a bit better. And this is another candidate for, yeah, can we make its, like, Zipcaster charge way cheaper, please? Sloshing Machine is another old midline that people tend to forget about. I would just take 2 frames off its end lag. 5 was clearly way too much. I go back and forth between 2 or 3 frames being added back, but given how much people are annoyed with AoE and how much other AoE I'm buffing, we can go with 2 frames, I guess, since it got a 210 Booyah and a buffed Booyah from before it was meta, so maybe 2 frames is good enough. I don't know. Nautilus is a weapon that I'd really like to see more use, and it just hasn't for a while, and honestly, I'm not too opposed to giving it some kind of buff. Again, we've been buffing a lot of AoE, so I think a weapon like this might be something that could get slightly changed. As for what to do, I don't know. I think it has to be really small. So let's say, like, 1 frame less charge time on each of its charges. This also leads me straight into edit splatling, which I think also should get a charge time reduction, probably 2 frames off of both of its charges. Again, I think both of these weapons could just be a little bit quicker at getting ready to fire, and that would help a bit with a lot of its matchups. Dowser Dualies is going to be the idea that Chase gave, so I'm not going to elaborate on it. I've said it before, and I like the idea, which is that Dowser Dualies dodge roll should have the same range as its standard fire. For such a heavy weakness as this mobility lock, it would be a good way to fix the weapon's problems. And if you don't want to do that, you have to give the weapon better paint. This gives it better paint, but it adds a weakness to it. Like, yeah, you could paint really well with the faster fire rate. It wouldn't paint, like, as well if you had more range. Obviously, it'd be, like, more spread out. But it would still paint better than standard fire. It would use more ink tank, and you'd be stuck not moving. But then you'd be able to get paint. It's like a cool trade-off, you know? And then the weapon has a bit more of an identity. And the dodge roll probably, like, which is the main thing I feel with this weapon, the dodge roll will get to actually feel really powerful, which is, like, given you only have one of them, it kind of should not feel complete shit. So I think that would be a cool way to fix it. I think Tenebrella should get a bit of damage and shot spread reduction. I think that Recycle should be a lightweight weapon. And I think Reflux should get 3% more range on a full charge, so it's a bit better at fighting. That's it. If I sounded like I wasn't super enthusiastic going through this list, it's because I'm not. I've kind of been wanting a little bit more than buffs like this, but this is kind of where I'm at right now. Even these are unrealistic expectations, but I'd like to see some of these happen. That's kind of my takeaway. I'd like to see some buffs to these harder weapons to make them feel a bit more worth using, and I feel that's kind of necessary in this environment. Thanks for watching. Hopefully the weather wasn't too bad on the microphone. I'll see you all later.